Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Governance Committee. It's the 17th of April. It's 6 o'clock and we're going to get started. My name is Councillor Wesley Roberts. I am the Chair of Governance now. Sorry, just catching up with that one. And tonight we're not expecting any fire alarms. So if it goes off, please go via the emergency exit. There are members of the committee here in the Civic Centre, in the audience and the committee, and there are some on Teams, so welcome to those in the virtual world. Tonight is being streamed live on YouTube, and the link can be found on the council website. Members on Teams are asked to keep their microphones on mute and unmute when they wish to speak. And if people could turn off their mobile phones, that would be great, or put them onto silent or whatever you do. We'll start with some introductions before we get properly going. We'll just go left. We'll just go around from my left. So we'll start with you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Chris Moister. I'm the Director of Governance.
Councillor Damien Bretherton, Walton Liddell West.
Councillor Peter Gabbert, lost the call.
Councillor Peter Pillinger, Buckshaw and Worden.
Councillor Margaret Smith, New Longton and Hutton East.
Councillor Angela Turner, Broad Oak, Penwitham.
I'm Matthew Pavlish and I'm the Democratic and Member Services Officer.
I'm Deborah Ashton. I'm a councillor for Charnock Ward and I'm also Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you very much. It feels like a new term. We're all back up to full strength, new team. Claire's not with us tonight, but first off, I'll hand over to Matthew just to, well, there's no apologies, so we can carry on. Let's tick that off. Item agenda 2 is declaration of interest. I don't think anyone's going to have any, but I'll ask. Nope. Okie doke. So that brings us down to...
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just before we proceed, if it's, I may just ask a question, please.
Absolutely. My question, your answers to your question might be what I was about to say, but you feel free.
Thank you. In the normal way of things, when something's referred regarding the Constitution, it normally goes to the Constitution Task Group Committee. It's a more informal committee, and in many ways, and I know you've been on the one for planning, we sit round and we have a good discussion. This is actually Constituted Governance Committee, and I just wondered why we changed.
Yeah, that was a fair question, Councillor Smith. So my understanding is it was a full council. We got asked to look at it as Governance Committee. Personally, I don't think there was a need to go to the subcommittee before it went back to Governance Committee. And obviously, given the pace we wanted to move at, or the administration asked us to look at it, I think this is a fine area to look at it in. I'm also having a conversation with Chris, the Director of Governance. I think it was appropriate to. I don't see any reason why it couldn't be here. What I was going to move on to say, but I will pause unless you had to come back. If we really need to kind of have more of a discussion on it, we can do. But I don't think. I think we should just carry on. Everyone's here, and we can be quite cordial with each other, and get on with the meeting and have a proper discussion about what's in front of us. How does that sound to you, Councillor Smith?
I was just wondering why we changed our procedures, as we keep changing procedures. You know, there's a Constitution Task Group Committee there for a reason, and that seemed to me the place where it should go, because it's the Constitutional Task Group Committee. But if you consider that's the best way forward, you're the chairman. I can't do anything about that. But
yeah,
I think the informality of the task group committee, I think, does help a lot, because people feel a lot freer to express their points of view.
I hear what you're saying, Councillor Smith. I see them more as like a circle rather than a must go to X, Y, Z. And I think there will be a need to use the subcommittee going forward in the future. I don't think it should just instantly come to Governance Committee for all things. I think just because this was an hour approach, I see fit to bring it here. Councillor Pillinger, did you want to come in?
Only to say, as I see the issue, this is not a matter of a constitutional principle, but of procedure. And as I mean, I'm new to this, but in previous areas where I've had significant governance functions, matters of principle about the Constitution would have a longer procedure to allow proper discussion over a period of time. This isn't about whether we allow questions or not, it's how we allow questions. That's procedure rather than principle.
Added value, and thank you for that. Not to say that you didn't add value, Councillor Smith. It's just I didn't even think at that point, so that's why I'm a great believer of more minds are better than one. Now, because I think Councillor Smith has alluded to, and we kind of anticipate this a little bit, it is a little bit different. And what I thought would be quite helpful for the committee is to hear from the public and members, councillors on teams or in the public first, before we then went to our debate in committee, so we can hear all the different views. I was going to go that way, and I've chatted to Chris as the Director of Governance, and I think that'd be the most appropriate thing. I was going to do it in order of how I've been approached before the meeting, but if anybody doesn't agree with that approach, feel free to say. I wouldn't want anyone to be holding back.
Hi, my understanding is that the terms of reference in the Constitution for committees state we have a fixed agenda, and that the committee, the councillors on committee have the discussion first before councillors not on the committee or members of the public. So I don't agree with that approach. Thank you.
That's all right, Councillor Turner. Thank you very much. Chris, can I bring you in to see whether that is appropriate or not? I just thought I was just only trying to add value and help, but I will pass over to Chris.
Yeah, Councillor Turner is right, is that that's the process that's set out in standing orders. We did get the report from the Centre for Governance and Public Scrutiny, who reviewed that and did point out that by having the intervention at the end by people not on committee, effectively after part of the debate has happened, it's undermining the informedness of the debate of members on the issues, because there might be further issues raised which would have impacted on the discussions that had taken place already. So the chair does have quite sweeping controls over the order of the meeting and the order of the receipt of information. So it's open for him to move to change the order of things, as long as everybody gets a say and everyone is satisfied that they've had the say and the input and got the opportunity to say what they wanted to say, then it doesn't undermine the decision making. It might be worth then, Chair, if there's strong feeling from some of the members on the committee that they've got points that they want to make, to do that first, then receive, and then move into a further opportunity for members to contribute, members of the committee to contribute. I think the point of Councillor Smith's of the informality of the working groups enables that kind of to happen away from standing orders, and that's kind of the approach I think you were looking to take anyway.
So yeah, I think thanks for that, Chris. I think I wanted to take a pragmatic approach, and I thought that was a pragmatic approach. So can I still proceed how I would like to, or if I wanted to proceed that way, would I have to take a vote, or I don't want to act in against the Constitution, if you see what I mean?
You don't need to take a vote, because the chair's ruling on these matters is final, which is pretty. I'll pull my face, but it is, because that's what the Constitution says. Okay. But the point from my perspective is this going to be an informed decision? If you were to leave out parts of it, so that certain parts of the standing orders were excluded to prevent participation, I would have more of a problem with it than changing the order.
Okay, so that's really helpful. If anyone else wants to say anything, I'm happy to listen to them about it before I make my decision. Councillor, I did see you, Councillor Hough, but I'm not going to take questions on this from people not on committee. Sorry, I should have said questions from committee. So, Councillor Turner, if you want to say something.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the only reason this is being debated at the Governance Committee is because we asked for it. And basically, the governance is that constitutional changes, certainly potentially probably go to the working group as well, but should be discussed by governance. So we would never be here anyway if we, as in the opposition members, hadn't asked for it to come here in the first place. I realise what the officer is saying is that obviously you have some rights to determine this. I'm not sure when you had made a decision to have this strategic approach, but if it was before the meeting tonight, I think we should have been informed out of courtesy.
That's fair enough. Thanks, Councillor Turner. I'm always willing to reflect and improve, and going forward, I will take that under account. If I decide to tweak it beforehand, I will let members know from all sides. So on this occasion, I am going to proceed and hear from people not on committee, because I think it's better for us to make an informed decision, and I'll go in the order of how I've been approached from members. So first will be Councillor Paul Foster, and then I will hear from whoever else would like to speak, because I've not been approached by anybody else. So David. I would like to get on with it, to be honest, Councillor Turner. Is it really?
Seriously, Wesley.
Oh, right. Okay. So
seriously now.
If you want to speak, Councillor Turner, feel free.
Wesley, you're a pragmatic young guy, and you're probably going to be the future of this council, and I have a level of respect for you. But you can't you can't say that someone's asked you to speak when the rest of us haven't been given fair warning of that. So you've just said we're going to have an open debate now where people not on committee can speak first, and I'm going to take Paul Foster because he registered. Well, but nobody's been asked.
Nobody else knew to register.
Yeah. So to be fair, Chair, I don't think that is fair. Okay.
I hear your points. I appreciate some of the kind of comments. Leaders of the oppositions were contacted by the monitoring officer and asked to give comments, and everyone, I know that some have replied. We've had an email with other comments from Councillor Walton, but I am going to proceed with a 3-minute time limit with Councillor Paul Foster to speak first. So, Paul, if you want to come to the microphone, that would be great. Thank you.
So just to be clear, Chair, I emailed you and, as is per the Constitution, and advised you that I was wishing to speak at the meeting. I didn't ask you to go first. I didn't ask to go last. I didn't ask for any changes. I just gave the Chair due notice I was wishing to speak. And just so the committee is aware of something which is relevant, there's precedence here because the previous Conservative administration changed the questioning on agenda items at the meetings of the Cabinet. The questions from members used to go after Cabinet members had debated it, and they brought it forward to members having to ask questions before Cabinet debated it, and that didn't go through any constitutional changes, just so the committee's aware. The paper in front of you, I'd like to think, Chair, is quite self-explanatory, and the questions that you're being asked to consider are relatively small in what's been asked. A lot of new members have contacted me over the last 6 months, stating how they find the format, the questioning, and the time it's taking to ask questions of the executive leader and the Cabinet at Council quite demoralising at times and very time-consuming and very repetitive at times. So just to remind committee members, we're not asking the committee or asking council to take away the opportunity of members of the council or members of the public to ask questions of me and my cabinet from council meetings. What we're asking is that those questions are presented in writing prior, which is common precedence across a number, if not most, of other local authorities in the country, and particularly locally. this is an issue that I think you raised yourself, or the monitoring officer raised earlier, that has been raised with us a number of times by both the LGA and peer reviews when they've looked at the structure of our meetings. As I said at the council meeting as well, the members of the council get an opportunity to ask questions of me and my cabinet at every single cabinet meeting. Members of the council, as do members of the public, Chair, sorry, members of the council and members of the public get an opportunity to ask me questions on anything at the Corporate Performance and Scrutiny Committee. And we're not asking to change either of those. Members of the council and members of the public will still get the opportunity at every council meeting to ask questions on the report of the cabinet, to ask questions on every agenda item or debate.
Please could you wrap up, Councillor Foster? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. This is a very important issue for the council. The council meetings are going on for far too long, and the prime example, and this is my final point for you, Chair. You only need to look at what happened at the last meeting of the council after we decided that this item was to come to the governance committee, where the question time took 45 or 50 minutes, Chair. The same question was asked of members by 4 or 5 members of the council of me, and they got the same answer, Chair. And yet again, the most important business of council, which was then later on in the agenda, was then looked at and debated some 3 hours plus after the meeting had started. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Foster. I can't see anyone online indicating they want to speak. So if they want to raise their hand to speak, please could they do so now. I'm going to go to Councillor David Howarth next because he's indicated he wants to speak and he's in the room. So I'm going to reset the timer. Is who, sorry?
Sorry, I was speaking to Mark.
I'm going to reset the timer. And obviously I'll show the same leeway to you that I've shown to Councillor Foster. Thanks, Councillor Howarth.
Okay. Can I just start off by saying I do find this whole process absolutely ludicrous. I came here this evening to listen to the debate and then comment on it.
Councillor Howarth, I was asking for people to comment on the paper that is in front of us, not the process.
Yeah, I'm moving on to the fact that
brilliant.
You constantly keep trying to shut me down.
I'm not trying to shut anyone down. I just want to hear what you've got to say about the paper. But thank you, Councillor Howarth.
I think I'm entitled to say that I find this whole process ludicrous, where I can't hear the debate first, but I'm being asked to comment on it in advance. It's a nonsense. However, if I could just pick up on some of the things Councillor Foster said, I'm not aware of anywhere in the Constitution that you actually write to the chairman and give notice that you wish to speak. And all the time I've been on the council, that just doesn't exist. Likewise, points of order don't exist in the Constitution, but you keep using them to try and shut me down during debate at council, where members jump up shouting point of order and then it's allowed. And this is what worries me, because we've always had a reputation in this council that we are open, we are democratic, anybody is allowed to ask questions, whether that be members of the council or members of the public. And for all my criticisms of the Conservative group and for all my differences with the Conservatives, I've always acknowledged that is something they've upheld. And I now find it very disturbing that the longer we go in this council, we're getting a democratic deficit, and there are more and more efforts being made to shut down debate and to stop people from having their say or criticising. We've just been told about how many questions are asked, and it's stopping important items from being debated. So what's changed since September? Because on the 23rd of September at the full council, there were 5 questions to the leader of the council, 1 from Councillor Williams, 1 from Councillor Wharton-Hardman, 1 from Councillor Unsworth, 1 from Councillor Caleb Tomlinson, and a member of the public who happened to be Derek Forrest. So we're the ones closing down this debate and asking too many questions, but it's perfectly okay asking these questions when it suits your political agenda and it promotes somebody who may well be standing for Parliament with plenty of questions. That wasn't a problem then, so why is it a problem now? And I do really worry. I've seen all this at the county council where, is Councillor Foster now trying to be the new Jeff Driver, where
I think we're
debate
swaying
isn't
a
allowed.
little bit, and
we're
it'd
not
be nice if
swaying at all. This is about
I think I'd like
the
to get
right
back more to the
question
principles.
and the right to debate. And again, you're trying now to stop me from speaking yet again. If you don't, every attempt to stop people speaking is because you don't like what you're hearing. At the county council, I've seen the nonsense at the county council as well, where you have to submit questions in advance and submit motions in advance, and they're taken in order, which is what's being proposed here. So what happens the day after the full council? You get questions and motions being submitted for the council in 6 weeks' time. It's an absolute nonsense. There is no need for this whatsoever. We've worked perfectly well for years and years and years with this constitution. Why not now? Why does it need changing now? Well, it needs changing now, as far as I can see, because certain members of the council don't like being challenged and they don't like hearing what's being said to them. I can see no other reason.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth. I wasn't purposely trying to interject there. I did let a few things go. I didn't think it was appropriate to refer to another council member towards another ex-leader of a county council there. I didn't think it was right to bring the alderman of the borough into it, or was it Mr. Councillor or former Councillor Forrester into it? And also, I think you said you use points of order to stop you at council. I don't think you were referring to me personally. I think you were referring to maybe other colleagues on the council. But that's why I stepped in there, because I just wanted to get to the principles. But thank you for your views on the principles. I'm just noticing that Councillor Phil Smith has joined the meeting. Usually he's in person, but he's on Teams. So I just want to make sure he's heard me if he wanted to speak on this item, just to indicate on Teams so I know. Other than that, I don't think Councillor Sharples, whilst he's here, doesn't want to speak. Therefore, that would close that section of
just before you
sorry, one sec, Councillor Smith. That'll close that section of the meeting in terms of what we've heard, and then we've moved to the committee members. But Councillor Smith, did you have a point?
I did actually.
Yeah.
You're quite right. Councillor Phil Smith normally comes in person. He can't tonight because it's a bit, anyway, that's a different matter. But he has joined a bit later, and he won't have realised that you have turned round the fact that the members are speaking first.
Oh, here he is. Let me bring him in. So yeah, Councillor Smith, just to bring you up to speed, I've done something I thought was quite straightforward, but maybe not. Of hearing from people not on committee first, so then we can make an informed decision and have a bit of a debate on here. But Councillor Smith, did you want to come in and give your views on this? If so, feel free to start speaking, and I'll set the timer at 3 minutes and show you a bit of leeway as I've done with others. But we can't quite hear you, so we're just going to sort that out. Oh, do I need to turn off? There we go. You try again, Councillor Smith.
Okay, well, you should have a full screen of me now somewhere, I think. I'll turn it off if it upsets you, but yes, I was going to come this evening, but unfortunately, my health at the moment just didn't allow me to do that. I was at a meeting last night and I coughed all the way through the meeting, so I didn't want to disrupt this one with coughing away. I felt quite embarrassed last night. But however, I've just heard what Councillor Howarth said, to be quite honest. I don't think I've got anything more to add to that, because I think from most of what I heard, and I didn't hear all of it, most of what I heard, I believe is absolutely correct. This council has been an upholder of the democratic process for a long, long time, and I do feel as though it's being closed down regularly. It was at planning, and here we are again. So I say I don't think I've got any more to add. I just give my apologies for not being there this evening, because I go to I think nearly all governance meetings, because I think the governance committee itself and the work that it does is really, really important for the council, and I do think it seems the wrong way around. Normally the questions are debated within the committee, and then the members are asked to respond. I have to say, quite often when it is that way round, although I've been sat there for hours and hours sometimes, they seem to bypass me. Not always, and not always on purpose, I have to say. But I think the agenda sometimes takes over people. So I think that's all I've got to say on the matter. I don't like what's happening, to be quite honest. But now I'll sit and hopefully listen to the debate around the governance committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and we could hear you loud and clear, and as always appreciate your presence and noted on your feedback as well. So I'll open it up to members on committee. Is anybody like to, obviously there's two things, isn't there? There's the what's been put in front of us, which we're being asked to adopt, and then there is also any additions that other people on committees might want to change, amend. I've got a few thoughts myself, but I'm happy to hear from others as well. So would anybody like to start tonight? Councillor Turner, is that you? Yeah. So, sorry, just to be really clear, if people could indicate by using their hands, because it doesn't flag up on the screen with the red microphone. But Councillor Turner, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I can see no reason for any change to the current constitution, especially as the reasoning behind it seems to me to be based on personal opinion and conjecture and doesn't stand up to scrutiny. We are told that this has come about at the request of members. Who exactly and how many members are we talking about? This council has always prided itself on being open to questioning from both members and the public, no matter what administration has been running it. And if this goes ahead, it's a retrograde step and the start of the erosion of open democratic process. We have already removed questions to committee chairs, and there is no opportunity to question the growing number of lead members all getting a special responsibility allowance. It is already not acknowledged that if members want a full and detailed answer to a question, they should put it in writing. Even then, there is no assurance that a valid answer will be given. The question on the governance issues surrounding the 15,000 given to Middleford Community Gardens in this case in point, where it was riddled with inaccuracies and false statements, and I was named in a legal document about which I had no knowledge nor had given my consent.
I'm not trying to interrupt you on purpose. It felt like it was really principled, and now we've gone into a really specific area of questioning, which I don't see how it benefits the debate on the principles. So I think it'd be better to keep it to the principles. So we have a quality. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Anyway, what if the question is simply, why have I not had a reply to my previous question? You want that in writing when you had weeks to provide an answer already. Cabinet members can defer to a written answer now, should they choose. That, though, should be a rare event if they are fully briefed on their portfolio and have a handle on it. If they don't, what are they being paid for? As for meeting time being spent on this agenda item, it is the last item on the agenda. The only time it might have any impact on reports for consideration and debate is if they are Part 2 items with press and public excluded. Something that has been frequently happening since May, but is not the norm. As for the length of the meeting, the Mayor has the discretion and can use it to move on if necessary, or a motion to move to the next business proposed. Why should members not be able to raise questions not on the agenda without notice? What other avenues are being referred to? The argument appears to be that members can attend committee and cabinet. We don't sign up to be on every committee. Members have lives outside the council, and if we do, what is the point of the full council meeting other than being a rubber stamp? I didn't stand for that. If 50 members all attend the cabinet, doesn't that just become the council? It is nonsensical argument that doesn't stand up. And as for being able to ask questions within the body of the reports, we often discover things that do not appear in them on which we want answers. For instance, a £5,000 payment to Lost Call Carnival, for example,
I think we're swaying again,
which was ruled away in a set of financial figures without any explanation, hardly open and transparent. I'll just finish off now.
Yeah, no, I'm happy for you to finish, Councillor.
Yeah.
I just didn't see the relevance.
Well, I'm a councillor, I'm an experienced councillor, and I do think it's relevant, so that's how it is. Okay, under proposal 13.1.1, it is now proposed that even if we ask a question, we are not allowed to come back. Under proposal 13.2.1, who decides whether the question relates to council powers and duties? We are the council, not the officers. 13.3.1 just stores up the nonsense of getting your question in first. Other councils have questions and motions being submitted the day after council has taken place, stored up for the next one. 13.4.1, a 30-minute time limit only makes matters worse, designed to curtail the number of questions. So if a couple of written questions are long and detailed, with a long and detailed answer, you simply don't get the time to ask the other questions altogether. Finally, 13.5.1 is just a mechanism to not fully or satisfactorily understand the questions and then rule it out for 6 months simply is not acceptable in any open and democratic process. This is at best a sledgehammer to crack an imaginary nut and at worst an affront to the democratic process. And I propose that we reject the recommendations. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Turner. Your comments, whilst I didn't agree with the analogy, the Sledgehammer song came to mind. Right, very helpful. I thought there was some interesting stuff in there, but I'll save. I'm sure there's others wanting to come in. I'm just checking this side. Oh, Councillor Gabbert, yeah, feel free to.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I see no issues, to be fair, with the report that's in front of us. I was one of the councillors, a new councillor, also an experienced councillor from elsewhere, who looked at it and saw councillors ask questions of Cabinet and Leader referring to Penwortham Town Council, which they have no clue of inner workings of that. I think we've heard 3 or 4 questions every council meeting that's the same question repeated. I think Councillor Turner has mentioned something about I think the purpose of this report is we want in writing, why haven't you replied? Why have you not answered my previous question? Something like that. I think the purpose of the report, or my own view, would be you wouldn't put that in writing. You would ask the Cabinet member, say, why haven't you done that? And then you would escalate the process. Obviously, if we've got Cabinet members who aren't replying, that's an issue that, again, at some point that'll come down and you do a detailed question and send that to council and say, we've asked these questions to Cabinet members, they've not answered any. This is ridiculous. It's happened 3 months in a row or whatever it is. I think what I've seen is questions that don't really need to be there. I've seen other councils who don't do this. Obviously, I know one of the speakers we had has mentioned the county council, Conservative run, that remove debate and stuff like that. I don't see this as removing debate. I know other councillors will or may see it as that. I see it as more limiting, making sure that we're using our time wisely, because I was one of them who think we spend a lot of time questioning, going back with supplementaries, and we get to like the debates on stuff that actually matters and improves residents' lives and things like that. Just my opinion. And I think sometimes that doesn't get as much debate as it should do. And I think that's what residents who elect us would want us rather to be discussing, compared to squabbling over. Sometimes there are relevant questions, in my opinion. Other times I just think there's just squabbling over stuff. I think, as was mentioned, I think something about the naming of Penwortham Live or Longton Live, and
come on, let's keep it specific,
etc.
Councillor Gabbert.
Apologise, Chair, but again, I don't see any issues with it. I just think we need to look into what makes things work for the council, and just because we've done something one way previously forever doesn't mean that we can't look at ways of improving. And yeah, I think that you could even go down to nuts and bolts and look at cost saving, the amount of time it takes for officers to be there for us to ask the questions, or just sit there when you could do it in an email. There are questions, and I don't think anyone can deny the questions that could be answered in an email. And if they aren't being answered in an email or in person, that's when they should get escalated into questions. But yeah, that's all I've got to say. I think it's fine. I'm happy to propose that we accept the report, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Gabbard. Sometimes can't keep up with the email responses from Councillor Belinsky, Gelder and Tomlinson. They're a bit too quick for me sometimes. But yeah, it's that how you get that fine balance of openness, which I think it does shine through, and the quality of the questions and whatnot. And it's that reasonableness. I think we were talking about earlier of expectations on a cabinet member. Yes, they can be on top of the brief, but in a world where we, embrace neurodivergence and things like that, we can't expect people to remember everything when there's quite a specific question. But yeah, Councillor Breverton, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted some clarification. When I read this, point 14, it says that it is proposed, therefore, that existing wording for the Standing Order 13 be deleted and the following adopted. And then it goes on to 13 questions from members. So I just wanted clarification. The way I read this is members can still ask a verbal question at the meeting, at a council meeting. They can still ask a verbal question. It doesn't have to be in writing, as it says in 13.11. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
I'm going to bring Chris in because I don't think that's quite right. But Chris, do you want to come up?
Yeah, so the way that the proposed wording is set out is there's two categories of occasions where members can ask questions. So the first part, 13.1, is questions without notice, and that relates to where there's a report on the agenda, so members can stand up and ask a question to that report without notice. And that includes the executive cabinet, the meetings from the different committees and cabinet, as well as the obviously the agenda reports for consideration and debate. So there is a provision there for without notice verbal questions. Section 13.2 addresses the agenda item for questions from members, the specific agenda item, and that's the proposal is to change that to written question.
Yeah, and that, sorry, and the written question can be about any topic.
Yes, there's no limits in the wording proposed.
Yeah. And just final point, obviously it says there that we get up, we ask the question, we get an answer, but we can't ask a second question. Is that correct?
Feel free, Chris. Yeah.
So the wording is put in the appended report. That is correct. If you look at the cover report, it's suggested that there is additional wording to allow a supplemental question. So there would be a supplemental verbal question permitted under the proposed wording in the covering report. And I think that's something that I think most have come back and indicated that would be something that they wouldn't want to lose.
Okay, thank you.
Can I clarify on the back of Damien's clarification that the question would be written beforehand and submitted beforehand as long as it was deemed appropriate by Chief Exec and Mayor, it would be answered.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't arbitrarily ask people to stand up to read out because the idea is saving time. We wouldn't say Councillor Breverton asked a question, he'd done it in writing, he wouldn't then stand up on the night to ask the question. Would the answer just be given straight to him, Chris?
I think that's one for perhaps members to give some consideration to now. I mean, the written question, if received and submitted, would be circulated to all councillors, so they would have had sight of it ahead of time. Some contextualisation to the question might not be inappropriate, but the question would have to be substantially the same as presented. You know, if the member were to introduce it, they couldn't submit a written question and then ask a different question, for example.
Okay, that's helpful, and I think we should have a chat about that. A few people have already mentioned about the lack of supplementary questions. I think that's something we should reinstate as a committee. And I was going to mention it on the night it was originally discussed, but we didn't get that far. So okay, but so that's something. But before we go into other things, we might want to add. Councillor Smith, did you want to come in? Thank you.
I think I just want, in the first instance, to make one or two comments regarding the way we are thinking of going, which I find is not as democratic as we are at the moment. We have RR at this moment in time celebrating our 50th anniversary, which is a great achievement for a borough like this when it has been put together from 3 different areas. And we've worked very, very hard to make sure that it did work and that we were different. It has been mentioned tonight by Councillor Foster that most other councils have written questions. That doesn't make it right that we should have them. We always prided ourselves, and we still do in our group, and I think in the Liberal Democrats as well, on being very, very open and allowing discussion. And what I have found recently, particularly in council meetings, is this not very nice way that has been going ahead of actually trying to stifle debate. Take the vote. Take the vote. We're not going any further. We're not listening. Take the vote. Stifling debate. This is, to me, is also a way of stifling debate. You're either going to get a situation where, as Councillor Howarth has said, the day after the meeting, you're going to get people who like scribbling away or writing questions in, and they'll pile up. And it says here at some point that the questions will be answered without any discussion. So if something is answered and suddenly you feel very passionate about it and that answer isn't what you want, you can't get involved. So that process of being open and getting people involved in it seems to me will disappear. We've always had the situation where members of the public could come. Yeah. They come here because they know they can get involved, they can get in part of the debate. At this moment in time, they, as far as I can see, will have more rights than we will have, because they will be able to ask a question without notice. So therefore, you have actually got a situation where the members of the public have more rights than the councillors. Just answer the question for me. And it's only just a little thing that occurred to me.
I'll indulge you, Councillor Smith.
If I'm sitting there and I really want to ask a question and I can't, can I nip out of the council chamber, pop out that corner and say, excuse me, I'm now a member of the public. Can I now ask you a question?
You know what, if you were in fancy dress, I'd potentially indulge you if they didn't spot you, but you carry on.
It's a fair question because I am a member of the public, because I reside in this borough and have done for a very long time. And if I feel that I need to be a member of the public as against being stifled as a councillor, that may very well happen. And you could actually find that because of all these questions that are going to pile up, you may get a lot of notice of motion, which then could actually prolong the meeting, which it does at county. The amount of notices of motion that are, I'm not going to comment on the substance of them, that's up to the people that put them in, but that prolongs the meeting. You also have a situation where the written answers, you're not telling me that a lot of those haven't been written by officers, because I don't believe it, because I think the majority of the answers are actually already pre-written. They all sit there with scripts like this, and that prolongs, and then you cut off after 30 minutes. I think we have a fairly good system. It's worked well for us, and I don't see why suddenly there is a need to change it so dramatically. And Councillor Foster said it's a small change. It isn't a small change. This is a big change. It's a big change to the way we have always operated. And I don't like it at all. And I will definitely be voting against it if it goes forward this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. I'll indulge you all the time. I think we all add value in our own way. And whilst I kind of disagree on the principles of it, from different angles. That's debate, isn't it? Could I think there might have been a few clarifications Chris wanted to come in with. I think there is an interesting spot there about what the rights of public to the rights of councils, and I think it's really important we probably have the same rights to stop that two-tier system. Can I just ask, you've alluded to some areas of not being content with it. Were there any suggestions of improvement you wanted to add? I'll turn my mic off for you.
Certainly, I think we should all evolve. I'm not saying that because we've done it for 50 years, we should always continue to do it in the same way. That's why I was interested to ask the question earlier on, why we didn't go to the Constitutional Task Group, because I do think at those informal meetings, you can actually put forward suggestions and listen and think, well, yeah, maybe that is a good idea. No, that's not. I think we could sit down and say, well, is there areas where there is room for improvement? Maybe the 30-minute rule would be something that could be incorporated. I'm not desperately to sit in a council meeting for hours on end. I really am not. I have other things to do with my life. And maybe 30 minutes is sufficient. I would probably be happy with that. But I'm not happy with the idea that we have got to always put in a written question if you want to know an answer. And it was alluded to by Councillor Gabbard about Longton Live and Pemberton Live. I don't
want to talk about Longton Live.
No,
I appreciate.
Can I just say
we can get back to the principles.
Can I just say that is something that is really, really a live issue within our communities that our members and residents were absolutely incensed about. And that's why it was asked about. And I think that was a justifiable question. And these are the sort of questions that people that are listening to the debate, and we forget sometimes that there are people out there who are listening, want to know the answers to. And that was probably the only forum where it could have been brought up. So these are the nuances, I think, of how the system is trying to work to get the best out of it without actually prolonging the debate. And if we probably, I don't know, we could perhaps be a little bit more careful in how we ask our questions. These are the other things that we should be debating. Should we actually nominate somebody to ask just one question on a certain thing? I don't know. These are things we could possibly debate, but we're not debating that. We're debating whether we're going to have written questions or not written questions.
Yeah, I had something really good to say now. I can't remember it. It's because you overwhelm me with your goodness, Councillor Smith. But we're all here to suggest things that we'd like to add in. I'm making a bit of a list from I'm hearing comments from different members. I'm going to go to Councillor. Oh yeah, sorry. I did say I would come to you, Chris. So then I'll go to Councillor Pillinger.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair. It's just something that was said. The discussion tonight concerns the issue of questions from members, and even now the process is quite prescriptive, and it's not about debate. There is a question, there is a response, and there is a supplemental, and potentially a response or not, depending on what the supplemental position is. That isn't a debate. That is a question and answer. It's quite an exchange. It's not. There is no provision at the moment for a debate under this agenda head. It is simply a question and an answer, supplemental and answer. So I just wanted to make that clear that I'm not. The proposal of this wording isn't to try and stifle debate. It's to try and focus on question and answer. That was just to clarify that.
Do you want to come back in, Councillor Smith?
What I'm saying is it's the discussions that have actually been trying to take place in council in recent times have been stifled by take the vote. And consequently, it's just an ongoing erosion as far as I'm concerned, that debate has been stifled. Now we seem to be trying to stifle questions. I think my point.
That from Chrissy's nodding and it's clarified you're on the same page. whether we agree or disagree on what we're saying. But I think it's whether, I think there is alluded to earlier about council. There might be a question that you're not happy with, and I think all cabinet members would generally try and attempt to answer a question and work together and be helpful to ultimately our residents. And I think I see the questions being asked beforehand helps them just be more prepared so they can add more value to the questions. But I will now go to Councillor Pilger, because you've been waiting really patiently.
There are times, Mr. Chairman, when you just need to wait patiently and then you get your say. I'm new, as everybody here knows. I've been a councillor just about coming up a year, but I'm not new to governance matters. I've had 45 years of being involved in governance within the Methodist Church, including local churches, circuits, which are gatherings of churches, and chairing the synods of the Plymouth and Exeter district, which I was chair of. That's about bishop level, if people understand the difference of the different churches. So I've also been on other committees that have governance functions. And I'm fascinated about how governance works. But my key here is, how do we enable this democratic body to function efficiently? My observation about meetings in general is, after about an hour and a half, you get half as much worthwhile work done as the previous 50 in the next 15 minutes as the previous 15 minutes. So when you get to meetings that last for 3 hours, half the committee is going to be brain dead, if you'll excuse the expression. That's not meant to be insulting, but I do think we get to a point of tiredness where we cease to have, we cease to function well. And I've asked questions, for example, of my colleagues about why is it that the meetings are going on for so long. So I do think, for example, that having written questions as a norm is a good idea, because it does allow, particularly where they're technically complex, for technically complex answers to be given, which can't be given on the spur of the moment. And I would encourage that. What I don't want to cut down is scrutiny, because every political system needs proper scrutiny. And when we look at our own parliament, Prime Minister's questions, which seems to be an object on how not to answer the question put, rather than one where you want to answer the question put, and an abuse of Parliament, to my mind, in the way it operates.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not referring to a specific Prime Minister, just more the theatrical goal of it. Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that what we don't want to do is move down that direction, and I think you can avoid that by having I don't know whether the Prime Minister gets written questions in advance, but I suspect that the flow of it is that he doesn't. What I'm trying to say is that I think we need to start with, how do we enable a council to run as well as possible? And I think there have been occasions, for example, I don't have the details, but where we've had questions asked where somebody has come and said, I haven't had time to read the agenda of a previous or the minutes of a previous thing, so I'm asking it now. My job is to read the data that comes before me and to ensure that I'm properly informed about when I get to a meeting. And there are occasions when I don't, in which case I don't ask the question, because we need to be informed about what we're doing. So I think I'd like to see the norm being written questions, not to stifle debate, but to enable those questions to be answered properly, which is what I think question and answer is about. Now, debate is a different matter. It's not the question and answer session that is about debate. The question and answer session is about answering questions. The debate is about the motions that are put to the council, like we're having now, when we have a motion put to us to change the standing orders of the council, the constitution. That's a debate that needs to be had, and I hope we're having a good debate. But what we're debating is how we handle the question and answer sessions. I don't want to see us heading in the direction that I've seen some councils heading in, And I have looked around at what helps elsewhere, where it's used to cut down the ability of people to do things. So you might, for example, say you can only ask one question and somebody wants to ask 2 or 3. Well, we do have a party system where they can get their colleagues to answer the questions that they aren't able to answer themselves in those circumstances, as long as it's thought through in advance. And I do note that there are situations in which the chair of the meeting can allow questions at the meeting. I still think that if you've got a question that's coming up at a meeting that is urgent, you ought to be able to give half an hour's notice. I mean, if something's happened in the news that we need to respond to, I don't see there's anything likely to not have at least half an hour's notice to the chair to give the chair time to prepare for that. And that might well be something that needs debate. But the question and answer sessions that we have gone on, to my mind, too long. And we don't allow our officers and cabinet members adequate time to prepare the answers that are necessary to inform our democracy.
Waited ever so patiently, but boy, did you deliver. I'm going to bring in, I've seen you, Councillor Turner. I'm going to bring in shortly. I'm conscious Councillor Ashton, on our first meeting, welcome, has not spoken yet. So I'm going to bring Councillor Ashton in, then I'll go to Councillor Turner, and then I'm going to have a little bit of a say, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very much with, although we haven't rehearsed and I hadn't heard them before, but the comments that Councillor Pillinger had just made about them wanting the council to run smoothly and well, and I have to say that it seems to me that there are plenty of opportunities for members to ask questions in scrutiny, at cabinet meetings, to which everybody is invited, and those questions can be asked in much greater depth, and debate can happen much more easily there. There is still an opportunity for members to ask questions without notice on items which are actually on the council agenda for the particular meeting. And again, there are opportunities to put questions without notice, and I really don't think it's unreasonable to ask people, if the meeting's on Wednesday, to do something by Monday evening, which would then enable a better answer to be given. And I'm new to all this as an elected member, but certainly some of my friends who are not in the least bit interested in politics and who think I'm fairly insane find some of the political toing and froing actually quite off-putting, and it puts them off the democratic process. Just a final thing I wanted to say, and it's not something that I normally bring up in these circumstances. I think everybody knows that I was a council officer, not in the immediate past before I came onto this council, but I'm an experienced council officer. And for my sins, my very first local government job in the 1980s was as a committee clerk. And so I do have extensive experience of, it was the pinnacle of my career was wanted to be committee clerk to council, which I did slightly early on, so I had to do something else after that. And I don't know of any other councils that have such an open approach to questions as we have, and I personally think our meetings would have more focus, and we could probably get more power behind some of the questions if these proposals were approved tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Ashton. I like the word focus. I just wanted to bring up I think a few people have mentioned the 30-minute cap. Chris was just talking about that, and he was just saying that any questions that, if it went on more than 30 minutes, they would receive an answer, although it be in written form, as it's currently written. So just wanted to bring everyone's attention to that. Councillor Turner, were you wanting to come back in? Yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously, we Lib Dems join you in liking the word focus. Yeah, I just want to pull us back to our residents and our residents' involvement. And I think that this current set of amendments to the Constitution affects our residents. I think some of us will know that the YouTube account of the full council gets the most viewings, and those viewings have been steadily going up. So I see that as further involvement in our residents of the council, and it's really important that, and I hope one day our stats go from, I don't know what the average is at the moment, is it 400 or 500 to 10,000, and I think part of having written questions it means that I think we're disengaging our residents in getting them involved, with YouTube being one of the flat platforms, because they now won't be able to see or have any visibility whatsoever of any questions being asked to the leader of the council or the cabinet members, and seeing what the answers are. Unless, of course, if this does go through, which I suspect it will do anyway, we can have an amendment to the website so that members of the public, our residents who obviously pay and fund for all of this, can see every single question that's written to the leader and the cabinet members, and every single answer as well, because basically that's been taken away from them, in my view. Thank you.
Oh, I hear what you're saying, Councillor Turner. Thanks for that. I think, as Chris was talking earlier, you might need to correct me if I misheard, which was a member might choose to say question number 4, executive member, I'm not going to read it out, but they could also maybe paraphrase the question in the same subject, as long as they didn't go over the time limit. And I'm hearing nods from Chris on that. Hearing nods, don't know if you can hear them, but I think the accessibility point that Councillor Turner raises in terms of making sure people feel involved and are able to access the written questions is a fair point, and I think we should feed that back to Democratic Services if this or a different form of this was to go through and then be adopted by a full council. And I can see Matthew tapping away. I saw a hand come up from Councillor Gabbert, and Councillor Breverton, and then I will do a little bit of a summary of what I'm kind of hearing and then see where we go, because I'm not quite hearing support for the current motion in its current form, but maybe some type of motion with some enhancements on it. But I'll go Councillor Gabbert and then Councillor Breverton and then myself.
Thank you, Chair. I was sort of echoing the end that Councillor Turner mentioned. That's something I thought of when we were discussing it before, is what would you do with the questions? I know we obviously have them on the website and you can look at the public agendas and things like that, but as an improvement going forwards, it's probably a good idea to tie them in with the YouTube channel. I think that's something that can come into this at some point. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Gabbert. And Councillor Breverton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, the current system we've got, the cabinet members are maybe kept on the toes, because a question can come and they should know the answer to straightforward questions about their portfolio. If we move away from that, where everything's written, could it not be that cabinet members might get lazy and they just rely on officers to write the questions for them? A cabinet member should be fully aware and kept on the toes about what they're managing. For example, if a cabinet member is managing the assets of the council, they should know all about the assets and the regulations and everything else. They should be kept up to date. But if that we keep them on the toes by asking those questions, which is what we've always done. So if we're taking that away, could it be that anybody could be made a cabinet member when they're not fully aware of the portfolio, and they don't really need to be aware of the portfolio because an officer is going to answer all the questions for them when it comes to council? I'm just wondering if that's a danger that's been considered at all.
I'm sure everyone's, excuse me, Councillor Breverton, I'm sure everyone's heard what you've said. I think, this is a balance, isn't there, of keeping on your toes and then going to one extreme of people lazy, and I'm sure they're not. But ultimately, any cabinet member would be foolish not to take the full advice and support the officers that do a great job in the council to help them fulfil the duties as a cabinet member. But I'm sure others would have heard. I really do want to bring it to a close, but go for it, Councillor Pillinger.
my natural reaction, Councillor Bretherton, is to say I think people need to be kept on their toes. But people are different in the way they have learning styles and presentation styles. And some people are good at answering things on their feet. I'm fairly good at it, I think. Others need, who can fulfill the role of a cabinet member perfectly well, but who don't have the same mental mindset as I have, that would enable me to answer the question on my feet. So I do think my natural inclination is to go with you. My thought through inclination is actually there's some equalities issues behind this.
Thank you very much. I don't see this end as the end of the debate, Councillor Smith. Would it be okay if I continued, or is that okay? Thank you. So what I'm hearing, and I will then reopen to debate, is there's obviously some people that disagree with it, but there's been a proposal for both approval and refusal, if you want to say, to use the planning term, sorry. But it's not been seconded quite yet. I think what I'm hearing is people want the same tiered access that the public have and councillors have. So I'm not sure whether that is in scope or not, Chris, but I think that does need to be addressed, if not now, in the future. People would feel more comfortable if there was a supplementary angle to this, and I think that's rightly so, because whilst you've got to hold them to account, you need to be sure that the answer you're getting, it might just be a clarification, but it also might be the point of the question you were trying to get to wasn't quite enhanced in the answer you received, so that would need to be included. There are a few minor, there are a few potential things that have come up, i.e. should question time be limited to one question per member, because we run a group system. There is a reference in the paper, and I'll just reference this for everyone so they can see, which is 13.2.2, which references questions to the mayor and committee chairs. Now, we currently don't have questions to the mayor or the committee chairs, so I think that should be removed from the paper, just so it makes sense. There is also a point which I think Councillor Pillinger alluded to under 13.5.1, which talks about the mayor and the chief exec in exceptional circumstances accepting late questions where they deem it to be of importance to the borough. I think the wording added to the end of that line, in my mind, which would be reasonable, would be at least prior to 30 minutes of commencement to the meeting. Well, you could potentially argue, unless there was something in the news that happened, which, the chances of that happening, who knows, but to be inclusive. So there is that. And then the final point, before I reopen debate, because as Councillor Pillinger alluded to, we are 23 minutes away from adding value, which I'm sure we're not, but that would be the length of his ideal meeting, an hour and a half. There is a reference in the council paper on page 6, and it talks about how long we have to have questions. So the proposal is that it would be capped at 30 minutes, and at the minute, councillors have 3 minutes to ask a question and 2 minutes to ask a supplementary. That would, in theory, if everyone took all that time, would only allow for 6 questions to be answered in verbally. And that's not even taking into account the answer from the executive member or the leader of the council. There could be a thought to reduce the length of asking a question to 2 minutes and a supplementary to 1 minute, which would at least allow for around 10 questions to be answered. So there's quite a bit in there that I'm bringing from the debate and some of my own thoughts from reading the paper. Is that something that committee was minded to propose and second, or do people have views on that? I'm going to pause there and look around. Okay, right. So we'll go Councillor Gabbert, then I'll go to Councillor Smith and then Turner, just in the way I saw. But I'll go to Councillor Gabbert first.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I proposed the report as in its original form. but obviously we've spoken. I agree with pretty much what you've outlined. There was a summary of what members discussed. I know obviously some members still disagreed, but I'm just in favour of the report itself, and I don't find anything wrong with what you've surmised there. So I'm happy to propose that we accept this report with the amendments that you've made there or mentioned. So I'm happy to propose that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gabbert. Now I'll turn to Councillor Turner is going to speak.
Yeah, obviously, I just think that, there are questions from councillors at council meetings from all parties, which in some cases are stage managed or just said as a joke by certain councillors. And the mayor always has the right to close down the questions that are asked. Okay, so that for me is quite a powerful position to stop the unreasonable questions that are asked to showboat or to criticise somebody else. This what you've just said there about us sat here tonight in an hour and a half amending what is a major, well, the most probably important document of the council, the constitution, and this is why I feel I'll go back to what Margaret said, which is that's why something like this should be discussed and edited and amended.
I'm going to shut you off. You can carry on. You can repeat what you said. I think it was there's probably evidence out there that the sure things are the more value add. I don't think the comments from myself or Councillor Bilger were meant in that way. I've not had my tea, but I'm more than not happy to have my tea till 10 o'clock. We can go on for as long as we want. I want the committee to feel that they have been heard and that we have debated this properly before we get to council. So I will let you, I just wanted to let you carry on, but I just wanted to make that really clear.
Right, okay, so we have a constitutional working group who are experienced, far more experienced and knowledgeable in the constitution than probably I am, because they're doing it on a regular basis. And this is why, first of all, I don't agree with the proposal because I'm sympathetic to residents who've contacted me to say that they believe that if they don't know what questions are being asked, and I assume residents are limited, residents can't come and ask questions then either. Okay, they can. All right. Okay. So the thing is, though.
Sorry, Chris, the monitoring officer, just said yes, they can. His microphone wasn't on.
So as I see what Margaret says now, they've got more right than we have as the elected members on their behalf. But this is why, to discuss amendments now to this proposal, and as I say, I admit I don't know enough about all the constitution, and this is why this should go to a specialist group who does this all the time, to have a thorough and frank discussion over a number of hours, and not what I see as a quick and dirty stamp. And that's an observation that I wanted to make. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Councillor Turner. I was just trying to find the bit in the paper that said obviously we can adopt what was in front of us or suggest amendments. I'm just going to clarify with Chris the membership of the working group that Councillor Turner referenced there. The only person I think that isn't here that may have been there would be maybe somebody from legal, or is that from your team anyway? So I'll just pass over to Chris.
Sorry, I got to admit I'm a little bit confused. The responsibility for the Constitution and maintenance of the Constitution sits with the Chief Executive and myself, and that's supported by Governance Committee as part of their terms of reference. Governance Committee are permitted to set up subcommittees to support their work, but there isn't anything in the Constitution that actually says there needs to be a Constitution working group. That phrase isn't in the Constitution. It's just an authority that the Governance Committee have to set up a working group to consider it. The last time we considered the the constitution in detail, I think there was possibly only Damien and Margaret on. So the experience of the people there who undertook that work, who are available to support that, are here. The previous members of the committee aren't on the committee anymore. So that's just the point I wanted to make, is that it's been mentioned a few times about the constitutional requirements. It is something that the committee could elect to do, to establish a subcommittee to consider it, and the practice has been on substantial changes to do that, where we've looked in great detail. And I think on the last occasion, I think everybody who was on governance committee actually sat on the working group as well. So although it was a subcommittee, it was the full working group. But I take Councillor Smith's point that it enables members perhaps away from the formal meeting setting to have those discussions. But I don't get the sense that those discussions haven't been had at this meeting.
I think we just all can't get enough of governance. That's why we all like to go on the subcommittee. And can I just clarify, Chris, while everyone's here, would you see on the committee, if there's an area that a member on committee would like to put forward to be reviewed that's in the constitution by the subcommittee, how would they go about that? Would they email Democratic Services, yourself, myself, just so we're all really clear on that? Because I'm not too sure either.
Well, I would normally expect that where someone's got a member of the public or a councillor has got a concern about something in the constitution, that it would come to me at first instance, and then it would come. Usually, and usual practice would be to bring it to governance committee ultimately. But there have been occasions, I think, where we have changed the constitution without where it's been. There is provision for me to do consequential changes where decisions of the council have an impact on how the constitution operates. So I affect the decision of the council as regards the changes to the constitution, but it's not been a decision to change the constitution. It's the consequence of the decision that's changed the constitution.
That was a very governance-y answer, wasn't it? But I think what I took from it was come forward, speak to somebody about it, and then if we decide that we can add it onto an agenda of the governance committee to convene the subcommittee. Okay, so Councillor Smith, and then Councillor Ashton. I didn't realise you were there. So Councillor Smith, then we'll go to Councillor Ashton, and then Councillor Pillinger.
If I could just help on that about the subcommittee. For years, many years, until maybe 12, 18 months ago, that constitutional task group subcommittee used to meet on a regular basis. And the officers used to go through the constitution and pick a particular area that needed to have a good look at and see if it needed reforming, amending, or staying as it was. And it worked perfectly well because people had that informality that they could talk about it. Then it came back to the governance committee with the recommendations, which was then discussed, and that was then passed on to the council. That constitutional subcommittee met before the last elections when we discussed planning in great detail. And I think we had 4 meetings maybe, probably lasted about an hour and a half. Councillor Pillinger said just earlier on that after an hour and a half you're brain dead.
No,
You're
3 hours is brain dead.
No, wait, I haven't finished yet. 1.5 hours, you're brain dead after that. You've just said you're quite happy to sit here till 10 o'clock tonight to discuss this, by which time we will all be brain dead. And like you, I haven't eaten this evening, and I do wish to go home at some point in this evening. The point being that if you go into a different scenario, you can come for an hour, discuss it, the ideas move about. You then think to yourself, right, well, we'll have another one, and we then can progress it. And that's how we evolved. and we came to a discussion. What you're trying to do this evening, as far as I can see, is we've got something in front of us. You're now saying to us, well, do you want to tweak it? Do you want to put in a little bit of this in or that in or the other? And I don't think that's possible at this moment in time, because I'm not prepared to just rubber stamp something just because we're here and we want to get home. There's another couple of things I'd just like to mention. Councillor Ashton, and I should say welcome to our little grouping, said that maybe this council has a very open, I think, attitude to questions. I don't see anything wrong with that, you see. I think that is a strength of this council, that we do have an open and democratic way forward, that you can actually look at things and accept people will come. Meetings don't go on that long, really, when you look around at some councils, believe me. The other thing is, half an hour. You just said, well, that would probably be 6 questions, because you'll have 3 minutes for this and 2 minutes for that, and then you'll have the answer. So let's chop it down. Let's do 2 minutes, 1 minute. Again, you're eroding this idea that people, as Councillor Pillinger very eloquently put it, not everybody is as eloquent at speaking. And therefore, it sometimes takes some people longer than others to get the question out, where some people can chatter away for hours. Not me. I don't tend to do that. But there you go. I do like to put my point of view. So, and the other thing is that I found very strange, and it maybe I'm digressing slightly, but at the county meeting a couple of weeks ago, a councillor from this establishment,
let's try, I'll indulge, but let's try and keep it neutral in terms of content,
said they wanted to change the county's constitution, which was written questions, to actually being able to go there and have questions as you come. And he actually stood up in the council across the chamber and said, if a council member who is a portfolio holder can't answer the questions, then he doesn't know his job. And if that's one of the reasons to try and shield people, I don't think that's a very good idea either. But I do understand that people don't always are as quick off the mark as others. I understand that. And certainly for new members who are taking up portfolios, it can be quite daunting. I do understand that. But I do think there are things that we could discuss that would possibly help us move forward, and we would all be able, as a governance committee, to endorse it. At the moment, I can't endorse this at all. And I'm sad about that, because governance normally comes to a consensus where we all agree, and then we can recommend to council. And at the moment, we can't. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. But I guess I can't comment on about the thing that someone else commented on at LCC, but I don't know if they were referring to the cabinet meetings at LCC, because I know our cabinet you can ask a question, but I don't think at LCC you can. And I think there's an element of how do you get the quality, but not reducing to political attacks, which don't really add value for anyone. I guess where I'm at, which is I don't want to rubber stamp something. I think it'd be better if we did something that added value, but we've also got to get the word that I wrote down was pragmatism. Of we need to be able to do things in a pragmatic way and discuss them and talk at them and decide quickly on them, or in a relative speed, rather than coming at it kind of going, you know what, I'm annoyed how this has been gone about. I'm just not going to discuss any of it, so I don't endorse any element of it. Because I think there are some elements, like the supplementary questions, that I think you were speaking, you weren't keen they would be taken away. So I'd imagine that's an area you would like to increase, endorse. But but I hear what you're saying, and I hear the need or the desire from some of the committee, especially those that have been on the council for longer than others, to use the subcommittee more going forward so we can have more conversation. And I always enjoy conversation at governance committee. So, and I enjoyed my one subcommittee, and I know we've got a bit more work on planning to revisit after a council or two ago. I'm going to move on to Councillor Ashton. Unless there's some, I don't think there. One thing from Councillor Smith, then Councillor Ashton.
Think that we just need to. Our group is not obviously anywhere near as big as your group, and you obviously are all of mine. That's fine, but some of our members, quite long-serving members, do feel very, very strongly about this, and I feel very much that if we did even got anywhere near a discussion tonight, we would have to take it back to our group, because they are very, very upset at it at the moment, and I'm sure the Liberal Democrat group are the same. So I think it would be difficult to actually come to some decision tonight that we could all agree on. Thank you.
You know what, I actually appreciate you saying that. If whatever goes through tonight, I'm more than happy between now and full council to sit down with members of your group, if you would like me to, and explain obviously some of the additions that might or may not be endorsed. And I'm offering that in the sense of, I think we should be collegiate where we can. I know the Leader of Council stood up at the last council meeting saying he's happy to do one-on-one briefings with the cabinet members and shadow members if in both the Conservative and Lib Dem group. And as Chair of Governance, I'm happy to have a little chat about it with others who may have strong feelings about it. Whether that, I'm not expecting an answer now, and I'm going to move to Councillor Ashton. It may hinder rather than help, but I just want to put that offer out there. Councillor Ashton.
Yes, I'm going against what you said, Chair. Sorry, in my first meeting, I'll probably get thrown off. But which was to endorse what Councillor Smith was saying, that I think making little tweaks in a meeting is probably not the best way to proceed on something like this. And I don't think we are going to reach a consensus in this meeting. So I'll just come back to the reason, paragraph 5, the reasons for the recommendations. It's to focus questions on business before the council, which has been evidenced by reports and or matters of borough importance. And I think those changes deliver this. One question, this is perhaps to Chris, the additional proposal at paragraph 8 of the covering report,
yes,
and the supplementary question and where that would go, because I think that would need to be, so we would need to amend the recommendations as put to make sure that that is included and where that would actually go. And then I would be happy to second.
Yeah.
Also a second.
Thank you, Chair, through you. The proposal would be to add an additional provision in at
amend 13.24.
Well, I think it would be because it would relate to the provision at 13.1 as well, Chair. So I think it would be to delete the wording at section 13.1.1, which says no supplemental questions may be asked. And that's in relation to questions on reports. And then insert an additional supplemental 13.3 in relation to supplementary questions, which would then, and then that would knock the wording on for the next point. So 13.4 would become 13.5 and so on and so on. So that wording would be included and would refer to both questions with notice and questions without.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for that, Councillor Ashton. And to be fair, in hindsight, I think I've learned quite a bit tonight. Obviously, being first meeting as proper chair, if I was going to bring some tweaks or some proposal amendments, sometimes I don't see them as quite big things, but I hear that others feel differently about them. If I'm going to do it, and there's not a subcommittee beforehand, I could have maybe emailed round and made people aware of that, just so everyone feels included in the committee, because that's what I want to be. I want people to feel like they can approach me and vice versa. I'm seeing Chris, which I'm.
Sorry, Chair.
So is it a clarification on me? Because Councillor.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Councillor Pillinger because he was waiting from before Councillor Ashton, then Councillor Turner, and then if Chris still wants to come in, we'll bring Chris in. So Councillor Pill. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Councillor Pillinger, if you want to come in first.
Clarification to Councillor Smith. I think I did say it was after 3 hours we got brain dead, not an hour and a half, but there is a progression. I need some clarification about what we're doing here, because I understand if we were voting on exactly what we've had in front of us, I think I'd be happy to go to vote. If we're going to amend it, I would expect on constitutional matters for the body, for this committee, to take a break of 10-15 minutes so that the wording can be properly worked out and presented to us, and then we vote on the amendment, which becomes the substantive motion. Does that make sense? But I don't think doing it on the hoof, whilst we're in the committee actually doing the work, is the right way of doing it for a constitutional matter. This is the constitution of the council, and I think the amendments, if we're going to make amendments to what's in front of us, then we actually need to know exactly what those amendments are, and that can't be done whilst the committee is in session, as it were. We might need to adjourn for 15 minutes to allow some proper discussion between the respective officers to ensure that we've got amendments to what, if we're going for amendments, we need to have them done properly by our legal officers so that they are not. The danger of doing it on the hoof is that we end up with something that needs amending again. The final point I wanted to make was, if we pass this evening, or at some future time even, I hope that in a year's time we might review the effects of that in this committee.
No, I think we should always review the impacts of the decisions we make. I hear what you're saying, Councillor Billinger. I think Chris is willing to do that. So we might have to take a short adjournment, because I think what is in front of us couldn't be approved because there's already changes we've talked about, in particular the supplementary element, that we then end up someone will end up having to amend it at full council. And whilst I think there's maybe agreement for the principles I've kind of alluded to be specific and see what you're voting on, I absolutely understand. Before I go down that avenue, I just want to, I think there was Councillor Turner and Councillor Smith who had maybe some clarification questions as well. It was Councillor Turner first and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I've got an additional question. Obviously, this agenda has been published in the public eye, and it's got a proposal in it. And if we amend it, then it's not been put into the public domain. And also, going back to what Councillor Smith said, I think that it should go back to the members, or I'd certainly want to speak to our Lib Dem councillors to discuss with them the amendment to the proposal. They've had the first issue is public and everybody's seen it, but this amendment won't be. That's the first point. The second point, clarification really, is to Chris. Are questions from the public, is that included in the 30 minutes? It's separate.
Yeah, sorry, again, questions from the public is a separate provision.
A separate 30 minutes? Is it 30 minutes for the public as well? Sorry.
No, you're fine. I've got it in front of me.
It depends how many people you've got.
There isn't a limitation as it currently stands.
Okay.
Depends how many people turn up.
Thanks for that clarification.
It's just that individual members of the public can ask a question for 5 minutes, but there are no limits on the number of members of the public who can ask questions. So,
clarification, there is a limitation on the elected members, yeah, of 30 minutes.
Not as it currently stands.
Okay. It says it in.
I think. There we go.
Sorry.
So I hear what you're. I heard what you're saying, Councillor Turner. I do, Councillor Smith. Did you have a? Oh, sorry, Councillor. No, carry on.
Because the implication the implication of, okay, members of the public asking questions which aren't limited to 30 minutes means that, if anything, they could end up taking an extraordinary amount of time, and they're actually getting in first then before the elected members as well. But I think we've got an issue there. I think that's a drop off.
Sorry, I think we're talking at cross purposes. There is a provision, an agenda item for questions to council from members of the public. There isn't a time limit for it, but each member of the public is entitled to ask one question for 5 minutes. And that's so if 20 members of the public turn up each with a question, we could have 100 minutes of questions. So in relation to agenda items, not the questions from the public, some of the committees do permit the public to ask questions.
Okay, so thanks, Chris. Thanks, Councillor Turner. So what I'm hearing, basically, I think what needs to happen is that section in terms of the public's rights needs to be addressed, and I think we should look at that bit of the Constitution in a separate as a separate time. So anything I've referenced about the public and the two-tier system, maybe for this occasion, for the sake of working at a reasonable pace, so we can go back to full council on this bit, I'll remove this evening. What I'm going to propose to do now is, how long do you reckon you need, Chris?
Only 10 minutes.
Okay. So I will shortly propose that we adjourn for 10 minutes, turn our microphones off. I think keep the YouTube link live, because otherwise members won't know when we have, the public won't know when we've come back, unless people disagree. But before I move to that element of it, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I was going to make a different proposal to the one you've just made, of having a 10-minute break and rewriting what we've got here and tweaking it and what have you, that we actually give Mr. Moister the opportunity to go away and take on board the things that have been said this evening, and rewrite the paper to come back with a proper amendment that we can actually look at, and we, as the opposition, and I'm talking Liberal Democrats as well as ourselves, can take it back to our groups and come back here. And I'm not for having meetings for the sake of meetings, Mr. Chairman, I really am not. But it may be that we could have another meeting, that we could discuss it when we've actually got the paperwork in front of us and we've had time to discuss it with our groups, and we can actually then make some progress. It's just a suggestion to you.
Always appreciate a suggestion. So let's maybe see if we can move in the middle a little bit. So obviously we'd like to have everyone's support on it if we could. I'd obviously understand if people wanted to abstain now and then at full council when they've had a chance to speak to the group, then they may think differently. And I would, when I presented the paper, I would explain that. Alternatively, if there was some support on the group, I could strip back some of my amendments to it and tweaks, and just add that people could have supplementary questions, and which, because it does say on this, even though obviously the Councillor Turner said that the public have seen some of this, it does say that as a committee we can look at any other changes proposed by the committee. So in terms of what's on the paper at the minute, I would propose it is we allow supplementary questions, and we also just tweak the minor bits which are around the mayor's questions and committee chair questions, which is just removing words, and then adding in about late questions that the mayor and the chief exec can allow, just adding in prior to the meeting starting, 30 minutes prior to the meeting starting. So rather than having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas where I'd be looking to suggest some amendments, and maybe we could pick them up in the future, there would just be 3 amendments to it, which I think would be easier, and maybe easier for Chris, maybe allow us to move at pace, and then also make other members feel more comfortable. How does that sound, Councillor Smith? I see a nod, I see a disagreement.
No, you see a shake of the head, you're quite right. I do. feel that we're trying to rush it this evening. We're trying to get it in place before we've actually had time to digest the information. And as I do stress, my group will want to discuss it and want to have a real good look at it. And at that point, they may feel that they can actually jump on board. I'm not saying they can, but I'm saying they may. But at the moment, they won't, because they won't have had sight of it, and therefore they need to be able to discuss it. I think one of the things that also, which hasn't been mentioned, which is that you've got to have your questions in by 5 o'clock on the Monday. Our group doesn't meet till Monday evening. That's been set in stone for many, many years. And if we wanted to put some written questions in, maybe they wouldn't come in till Tuesday. I don't know. But these are the sort of things that, you know, they might seem small and minor, but they are part of the way we operate as a council and as groups. And groups are important. They make up the fabric of this council. And I do seriously feel that it would be much better for Mr. Moister, instead of rushing it now, and he also wants to go home for his evening meal, that we could reconvene when we've all had a good look at it and we've had time to discuss it. It may be that the tweaks that you're proposing won't be acceptable to your group. I don't know. There's a thought.
It's all right. No, I hear what you're saying. I am really trying to work on this with everyone on the committee. That's why I've tried to strip it back from 6 to 3 tweaks, changes. As far as I'm concerned, and this is not me trying to be disrespectful, full council devolve kind of the ownership of the constitution, looking after the constitution, to governance committee, and we are the people that are represented to represent our groups, and we are well entitled to make decisions on it and vote on it. And recommendations, Councillor Smith, and then they will go back to full council. I'm conscious of the time. I want to proceed, so I am going to propose. Well, can I propose something or not, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to propose that we convene for, I'm going to say 19 minutes, and we come back at 8 o'clock on YouTube. Is anybody willing to second that proposal? Sorry, and that would be to give Chris time to write up the proposal, the amendments that are being added, and everyone be able to vote on what has been put in front of them, so they're sure of what they're voting. See lots of hands. I'm going to go Councillor Gabbert.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you very much. But as you've said, obviously you can debate all the other stuff that's been commented on now. The amendments, in my opinion, have been the original proposer, and that big. I appreciate you trying to be inclusive and give everyone time, but I wouldn't expect more than 5 minutes in an adjournment for Chris to write out what my amendments were and discussing that. Obviously, I'm happy for longer, but I think we can get them done in that time.
Okay, I was just trying to think of a reasonable time for the public to expect us to get back. But I think if we aim to get back on by 5:02, that gives just over 10 minutes, and then a bit of a comfort break for other members. But I would need someone to second it if that is how we wanted to proceed.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Gabbert. So we now have to vote on that. Oh, Councillor Pilger, is it a clarification question?
Yeah, it is. You've talked about a number of amendments that you were thinking about, and then you talked about reducing the numbers. Can I suggest that you do the work on all of those, and then we can look at them one by one and decide which of them we want to carry, if any of them?
Yeah, I'm happy to work with Chris on that. Okay. Those in favour of adjourning for 11 minutes, so Chris can do a bit of work. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 1 against, 2 against, 3 against. Okay, so we're going to adjourn, and we'll be back on YouTube at 5:02, and then there will be the mics will be off during that time. just for anyone in the virtual world, just the monitoring officer still typing away very quickly, but we'll be back with you soon and commence committee. I just want to give you a little update. Okay, as Councillor Smith has pointed out, we're a little bit over what we allowed, so we're 9 minutes over. So that's going to be sent round to members now as we speak. From Chris. Sorry. Battery on what? The speak. Oh, right, okay. Is there any chance you could look at... Yeah, that's all right. Thanks, Councillor. I think Chris has highlighted the in yellow the amendments that are being proposed or were being proposed. So he's just typing in all our names. The virtual members will be getting the email as well, so they can see what we're discussing. Okay, so we're now going to reconvene. Thank you for your patience. Everyone should have just received an email I have from Christopher Moister, which has the amendments. I don't think the yellow's come through, but they've crossed out the words. But Chris, are you able to talk us through the changes which are in line with the principles we outlined earlier?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Okay, so...
Sorry, Chris. Councillor Ashton is just saying if you open it up in Word, the yellow is there for the highlighted, just for members. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. So these are the amendments that were recommended by the Chair to the proposed wording. So 13.1.1 has been amended to delete from no supplemental questions may be asked to the end of that provision. There is now 13.2, which is questions without notice. 13.2.1, there's the addition of the word one. So a member may ask one question on any matter in relation to which the council has powers or duties. 13.2.2 has been amended to remove reference to the mayor or relevant committee chair. 13.2.5 is a tweak to the wording, which is something that was raised with me away from the meeting, and it seemed an appropriate amendment to make. That's to change or to and. So a member to whom a question is put may decline to answer and refer the question to another member, and this is to ensure that questions put are answered. 13.3 is the new provision, which is the wording in the covering report relating to supplemental questions. So a member has received an answer to a question given under part 13.1 or 13.2 may ask one supplementary question arising from the answer given. And that's taken from the wording in the covering report. The numbering has been amended to move it on one to reflect the addition of that provision. And then in the section 13.6, mayoral discretion, 13.6.1a has been amended so that to accept late questions received no later than 30 minutes prior to the commencement of the meeting where they deem it to be of importance to the borough. So those are the amendments, Chair.
Thank you. Chris, are there any clarification questions or any proposals from members? Councillor Gabbert.
Thank you, Chair. No, that's as you surmised before when I proposed the amendments in writing. So I propose we go with accepting that and recommending it to full council with those amendments set out. Thank you. Thanks,
Councillor Gabbert. Is there anyone wanting to second that proposal?
No, second it.
Councillor Ashton has seconded it. Are there any other proposals from members on committee?
Just clarification, Mr.
Go for it, Councillor.
Are we voting on these amendments then and then voting on the substantive motion?
So I think the vote is going to be that what's been proposed is for the vote to be on what has been sent round from Chris, which includes the amendment. So it'll be to one vote on the piece that's been put round. Just checking there's no more proposals before I close or go to the vote. Councillor Smith, do you have a proposal or a clarification question?
I think basically,
go on.
I have to say, just looking at it, it's not something I can vote for because my group will want to look at this in detail again. And therefore, when it comes to the vote, I shall vote against it. And I would like to make sure that that vote against is recorded so that it is quite clear that this governance committee is not unanimous because of all the concerns that we have we have put before you tonight. So I'm very disappointed that we can't come to a consensus because I think we have rushed it to such a degree simply because it was said at the meeting, at the last council meeting, it has to come back to this council meeting. And that's not the way we normally do things. We normally do things the way they should be, properly done, thought through, and taken with due care so that we don't have to come back again in a few months' time and start rewriting the Constitution yet again. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. I've really tried to work on this and try and get some consensus, but unfortunately that's not been possible. And I'm glad you didn't point out any issues with accuracy in the proposals that are there. So I'm going to move to the vote. Those in favour of the proposal that's been outlined.
Can I ask a question?
No, I'm moving to the vote now. Unless it is a clarification question on what is being proposed. Is it a clarification question, Councillor Turner?
I just think this has been rushed through. It's ill thought out. And I can thank Councillor Green for pointing out that the supplementary questions were missing.
The supplementary questions are included in the proposal. All those in favour of the proposal, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against, 1, 2, 3. That's been carried. Thank you very much for everyone's time this evening. It has been longer than I thought, but I think we've added some value. It's a shame that some members are walking away from the meeting before it has finished. And I'm actually quite disappointed by that. But for those all online, and thank you to everyone who has stayed, and thanks to the officers, Chris and Matthew, for staying this evening as well. I'll see you all at the next governance meeting, which is in May.